Hey folks, welcome back to Dice Commando. Thanks for checking in. Tonight I'm here with Josh the Intern, who was able to make it up to New Jersey for all the things up there, and he's given his full rundown tonight's episode. A huge shout out to our channel members for supporting what we do here. If you want to get involved with the channel and the Dice Commando community, please consider joining as a channel member. Remember, these videos are only possible with your support. You can show that support with a like, a subscribe, and by leaving us a comment and sharing your feedback. Community first, and go Commando. Hey folks, welcome back to Dice Commando and the Commando Cast. Thanks for checking in here tonight with Joshua the Intern. How's it going, my friend?
It's going all right. How are you, sir?
Going all right, or is it going great? Or just going okay?
It was a fun weekend, and I feel like I'm starting to finally recover from all the travel and craziness, but we made it through, and I'm happy to be able to report what was been going on with my weekend.
All right, fair enough. Well, let's just go into it, and we'll just kind of bumble through it, I think is the best way. So you flew out on Thursday, is that correct? So you were there for everything?
Yep, landed in New York around 8:30 local time, and took about 3 hours to actually get to my hotel, which was a little crazy. But once I got there, the first person I saw was Jake Burns. He happened to be hanging out with some of the guys who were testing for the Procore and just had gotten back from the banquet, which I didn't even know that the banquet was a thing. So that was very cool to learn about and hear about. A lot of people got to meet James White and have a very cool kind of evening with him and the LSS team. So that was very cool for a lot of those people who were able to participate. And so it was very cool to see a local and see some of the other guys who were getting ready to grind out for the first ProQuest.
All right. So what did you end up? What was kind of your whole weekend plan, or not really plan, but how did your weekend end up panning out, just from like a summary level, and then I can ping you on the various things.
Sure, yeah, so I knew Friday, since I wasn't in the ProQuest, I was going to be doing side events. Side events didn't start, I think, until noon. So I had some time to just kind of enjoy the space. It just so happened my hotel was within walking distance of the convention center. So some of us got together for a continental breakfast at my hotel, and there were people in the hotel lobby grinding out games at 7 o'clock in the morning, which was kind of cool. And then, so a lot of Friday in the morning was just trying to see people that I was hoping to meet that I hadn't seen in the flesh and blood before. So obviously I was there with Jake, who was getting ready to actually make his run in the ProQuest. And around round one, after round one, I was able to meet Simon, and I even met James of the DC team from our British contingent, and it was very awesome to finally meet them. And they're very pleasant people. And then so that was most of the morning for day one for me. It was just trying to see who all I could meet and see. And then I started doing side events at noon. And my first side event didn't go too great. It was constructed. And I went 0-2 very early on. And it was two very not just not good matches. It was also like the deck didn't perform well. So I was really worried about going into the calling, because I'm still on Viserai, because that's just who I've had the most reps with so far this year. So even though I know he's less favorable than Chane and possibly even Briar, it's just who I was more familiar with. So I felt like any advantage I would gain switching to those other heroes would be lost in my inconsistency with him and the kind of learning curve. So that made me feel a little doubtful about the rest of how the calling might go on Saturday. But then I did get to do a Monarch sealed, which I don't think I've done a Monarch sealed since Monarch first came out, maybe one of the pre-releases. And it was very fun, and I ended up going with Chane, and I went 2-2, but it was a daily double, so I got extra prize packs for that, so that felt like a lot of fun. And that's really all there was for me for day one, was just keeping track of how everyone was doing. I know that Simon made day two Jake technically made day two, but he was on the bubble and he felt like he'd basically have to win out to have a shot. So he ended up deciding to go to the calling
Hmm.
with the rest of the Houston crew who were there were all participating in the calling except for Jake. So he decided to switch over to the calling. So then a lot of us were tweaking, and some of us were testing. Where people were playing in hotel lobbies until midnight, whenever the hotel kicked them out and said they had to go back to wherever they stay. And that was day one.
What was Jake on for the ProQuest?
He was on Starvo.
Okay. And
And
is
he
that when he
had
ran into calling?
yes.
Okay.
Yeah, he was running Starvo. He was trying to do more of a control build and rely less on the casino because he felt like it was very good into Chane, who he thought he'd be seeing quite a bit of, and he had a decent shot against Prism. And I don't remember. I know he ended up 4-3 on day one, and I know one of his losses was to Starvo. He just got high rolled. One of his losses was to a Chane, and I think a Prism. So the people you expect to see
Right.
at the high levels, the high level play with the best decks in the meta.
All right. So then walk us through because something you had mentioned to me was that because you were busy with the calling, you missed most of day two of the Pro Tour.
And that was
Right.
the one thing that was we're obviously very invested in how everyone's doing in the calling, who's started off 1-0 and who. But at the same time, it's kind of weird because the convention center was huge. I don't know the exact size. I know I've heard numbers of like 2,500 people um, were in this area, and you're less than 100 feet away from the people who made it to day two, but you have no idea what's going on with them because the calling's happening at the same time. So it's kind of interesting. We're having to rely on people thousands of miles away from where we were in the same exact room with these people just to know what was going on. That was kind of exciting because we're pinging everybody in the Houston group to see how everyone's doing and trying to meet up after rounds and talk about what we've seen and haven't seen. And it was just an interesting experience because there was so much going on. There was, obviously they have vendor booths. They have so many. They had the calling going on at the same time as day two of the ProQuest, and then at noon, same thing. They started doing side events. So there was just so much going on, and at least from my experience, it seemed very well run. There were some technical issues. I think when the calling started, the servers crashed because I think so many people were trying to update their phones to get their pairings that it took almost, I think, 20 minutes before we actually got our round one pairings because of the technical issues. But once it started, everything ran great.
And was that the local servers or did Gem itself is what I heard?
I
But
think Jim
yeah.
itself, yeah, was just crashed there for a little bit.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so walk us through. So you played this,
Hmm.
and how did your day go?
Ooh, it was interesting. So I went in with not a lot of confidence, but the first match I had an Earthbriar, and in some of the pro quests earlier in the year, I had won those matches, and I don't know if I can identify what it was that made that a successful match for me, but I think it. I play very aggressive Viserai, and I think that I can just outpace you,
Hmm.
and if I can get to you before you get your channel Mount Heroic out, then I can win. Every one of those games were extremely close, but I've so in round one I think I faced an Earthbriar twice in two different previous PQs. Every time they were very close matches. And this one I started off on my back foot. I think at one point I was down 24-40. I hadn't even done any damage because I had this just really awkward hands. And then the deck started working. I started getting my non-attacks with my attacks with my go again all at the same time. And once the deck kind of starts humming, was able to catch up and get a round one win.
Nice. So 50%, you're above 50% of the field going in. That's pretty good.
Yeah, I got a win, which was the way I was feeling. I didn't. I thought it was very plausible. I could go 0-3 or 0-4 before I dropped. And I got a round one win and felt pretty good about it. And then we got paired for round two. And round two was actually surprising because it was I need to check my notes if it was an Oldhim or a Starvo. It was actually an Oldhim, which I wasn't expecting to see. And I was very worried because Viceroy lost one of their kind of outs for that matchup in the trying to go OTK, which my deck isn't necessarily designed to pivot into that anyways. But with the loss of Scaletta, I was very worried about the matchup. But unfortunately, I have to say, it was probably the most one-sided matchup I've ever been in. That was to my benefit. Every single hand, I had just perfect cards that synergized with each other. Every time I had my go again, I had something that made a rune chant, so I didn't have to pitch for it, and that triggered Shrill of Skull Form, or turned on Swarming Gloom Veil. And it was like just 5 or 6 turns in a row where I just had Yahtzee, and he couldn't really respond because he was having to be defensive because every turn was 10 to 15 damage. And those were the least efficient of my turns. There's sometimes, obviously, Viscerai when Revel and the Runeblood is in play where you can easily get above 20 with all the damage you're pushing, and Oldhim can be very defensive, but it just turned out to where every time he ice reacted to put a card on top, that card on top didn't change what my output would be for that turn, because that was a card I was going to have to arsenal because I didn't even have enough actions to play my whole hand because I had what I needed to. Pump, attack, generate root chance, swing with Rosetta, and then have a card left over even. So it was just very unfortunate for him. He obviously was very frustrated. He handled it very well. It was a very pleasant opponent, but I felt guilty almost. I felt like I starvoed him without even being starvo, because it was just such a one-sided affair of just every hand was outstanding, and the deck worked better than I think it's ever worked before. And it made me feel pretty confident that maybe this isn't so bad.
Nice. So then round 3 then? Did you keep it up?
Did not. It was a match against Starvo, and I don't want to say I got high rolled. I really don't. I felt like I had a chance in the game, and we're both trying to do what we're trying to do. He's trying to get some defense with some frostbites, and then I think he maybe only fused once or twice early, and then once later, which ended up being actually rather impactful. But it was a very back and forth game. It was very interactive. It's not what the horror stories you hear of just getting out absolutely owned by Starvo. There was one misplay where there was a turn where he hadn't been blocking, and I felt like he must have the fuse. And I had the option at the end of the turn where I could have swung for 5 more with Rosetta, had like 1 rune chant. Swung with Rosetta just to try to force 5 more damage in, or I could arsenal the card that I would have had to have pitched. And I thought, I'm probably about to lose 2 cards, either from Oaken Old or Crippling Crush. So I want to arsenal this attack to make sure I have an attack for next round. And he ended up not having the fuse. And I think he was just saving up to pay for if I remember correctly, it was a Spinal Crush to stop the go again. So I think that particular moment where I didn't do 5 more damage, and then, I mean, yes, he didn't have the fuse right then. I think that decision to take a little bit of the pressure off, because I was kind of anticipating a big hit, may have cost me the match. It was very close at the end. I ended up losing because he did have dominate, and I was out of armor. But I felt like I was very much in the match. So even though I lost, I felt like it was competitive, and that maybe that one misplay where I kind of took my foot off the gas because I was worried about what he was about to do to me, that kind of hesitancy may have led to the fact that I ended up losing that match, instead of possibly putting more pressure in, or maybe forcing him to block at that point, or pitch to prevent Arcane or something. Anything that would have put a decision point on him instead of me deciding not to do that.
Mm-hmm. Fair enough. Okay, and then so you're 2-1 going into round 4.
2-1. So I'm still feeling pretty good. I go into the next match, and it's a Lightning Lexi, and I faced this a little bit locally. There's a guy who was experimenting first with Ice Lexi and then Lightning Lexi, and I don't really know what to do against that deck. And I don't know if it's because I don't have enough reps. Like, I feel like I should just try to outrace it, but there's so many on-hit triggers that pump damage in that deck that I feel like if you're not blocking, you're just opening yourself up to taking more damage. So I kind of feel like I felt unsure about whether I should be full gas or blocking, and it turns out that sometimes that choice doesn't really matter because there's I want to say from turns, call it 3 to 5. That could be wrong. It could be from rounds 2 to 4. It was a very fast game. I was presented with a situation where they play a red Electrify from Arsenal. So it's threatening if anything hits, it gets a buff on damage. So I felt obligated to block because I could send some damage back and just try to survive those Electrifies and neutralize that threat. So round 1, if I recall correctly, it was a red Electrify. He came in with the Remorseless, which kind of incentivizes a block anyways, because I don't want to take any damage for every action card I play. So I block. And then he has the Lightning Press, which not only puts the damage over for Remorseless in and of itself, but then you get the 3 extra damage from Electrify. And though those weren't his only attacks in the turn, because he often had Go Again, obviously turning Electrify over gives him Go Again from Lexi's ability. And then this next turn, it was the same exact thing. Red Electrify from Arsenal, Remorseless, and a Lightning Press. And I was thinking, okay, that's rough, but it is what it is. And then the next round, it may not have been a red Electrify, it may have been yellow, but it was an Electrify with a lighted up.
Mm-hmm.
And then he had the Lightning Press again. So that turns into extra damage from Lightning Press, extra damage from Electrify, and then extra damage because I have 4 equipment. And at that point, it was just basically GG. Because all that extra damage, even though I was blocking, I don't think people look at Lexi the way you look at Dorian when there are times where you know that you should probably overblock or it could cost you the game.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's inexperience on my part against not playing against Lightning Lexi, but the Lightning Lexi builds I've seen seem really dangerous. And it's kind of cool, actually, because you see these interactions where they have something that can buff, it gets to draw them a card, it gives them Go Again, and Electrify. Then you have any good arrow, it doesn't even matter if it has a hit effect, that you can push over on damage with Lightning Press, and then get to do extra damage. It was very cool. I don't know how you beat that deck. I know that a couple Lexis, I think, made some of the top cuts in both Pro Crest and in the Calling. I don't think they made it very far, probably because of Starvo being very defensive and being able to get cards out of their hand. But that interaction with Lexi and Death Dealer and getting to use, Snapback to activate Death Dealer again, and every time you activate Death Dealer, you get to draw a card. So they're just constantly feeding the machine. It seems like a very cool deck that I think I might be interested in kind of exploring that, for the next ProQuest season that's already starting next week.
So it was Death Dealer, not Voltaire.
Right, it was Death Dealer. That's what a lot of the guy who was doing it locally was doing Death Dealer. So I hadn't played anyone who wasn't local, but I had seen that build, and I only beat that build once, and it was because I happened to outrace him. But it's very interesting because it is using Death Dealer. They get to activate it again as an instant. So they're also getting action points at that point because Death Dealer's ability has Go Again inherently. So they're able to not even only draw, but continuously shooting arrows because they're getting not only Go Again, but action points from activating Death Dealer with card draw. So it's a very cool mechanic. Very dangerous. And I'm not even sure if he was running 3 of a kind because I don't know if you need it in that deck because you get so much Go Again and so much card draw. I don't know that you need 3 of a kind, or it could just be that the game went so fast and we didn't get to that part of his deck. So I'm kind of curious what those decks look like, but Lexi seems really good right now. I'm not saying that just because I lost. It legitimately seems like it's a pretty good aggro deck that I don't think a lot of people have experience against. Like, how do you block that when you know that they can go over with Lightning Press, and then you get some of those arrows that have really awesome hit effects. Like if you do play a card, you take damage, or I got obviously Sleep Darted. Isn't fun with Viscerai because you need those enchant creations to fuel your engine. And suddenly, Swarming Gloomveil doesn't seem that awesome if you don't get to, you know, build free rune chants just from playing cards.
Mm-hmm.
So it was very effective in stopping me, that's for sure.
Yeah, fair enough. All right, so you're 2-2 going into round 5.
Round 5, I'm feeling a little nervous at this point because I had a previous experience at a PQ where I had actually started 3-0, was feeling really good, and then ended up going 3-3 and not even making the cut. So I was really nervous about having that happen again. My round 5 was another Earthbriar, and once again it was a very close match, and I'm not sure. I think it's just a matter of, you know, if I can race you before you get your Channel Mount Heroics. I did. He did have a Channel Mount Heroic at one point, but he was forced to block with it because it's a 4 block at that point because he had an embodiment. And it was a very extremely close game. I think what ended up winning that game for me was I had him down to 1 health, and I had no attack action in my hand, but I had Sonata and 2 blues. So I just pitched to see 6 cards with Sonata and happened to get the perfect 3-3 split for 3 arcane damage. And he didn't have Arcane Barrier 3. So it was a very weird way to win a game, but it was a very close matchup. But for whatever reason, Viscerai seems to be very good, or at least I've been very lucky to have won all my games. I think that's 4 games now against Earthbriar with my Viscerai build. So it seems to work.
Interesting. Well, hey, man, credit for playing your outs. You got to do that sometimes, right? So, all right. So now you're 3-2 going into round 6.
Yeah, and
this was an 8-round first day, right?
It was 8 rounds, and they said that if I remember correctly, X and 2 would make the cut going into day 2.
And some X and 3s would bubble.
No, I think if I remember correctly, since it was 8 rounds, it was because if I remember correctly, for the Pro Quests, some X and 3s would make it because it was only 7 rounds. But since this one was 8, based on numbers, it was X and 2, and I can't remember the exact number. They said either this many people or all X2s, whichever's is greater. I guess there's a situation where if there's draws or there's other things, it's possible that you can have not that many X2s. I'm not sure. But they had a minimum and a kind of open max of anything X2 or greater was guaranteed to go in. So everyone knew that if once you hit the 3rd loss, there was no chance. So this is where I go into 3-2, and I hit a Starvo, but he was a build that I hadn't really seen before, and I was actually kind of excited to see it. He was running Mage Master Boots with... so as a Guardian player, you see Mage Master Boots, you know if you've played Barvo, which I did a lot of last year, that means he's running Tome of Fyendal, which just made me kind of happy inside, because that feels more like Guardian to me. Kind of thematically, you know, like, it's kind of silly to think of a guy who's got a big shield and is running around punching people in the face with a hammer to have these little froofy boots. But I think it's funny, and I like that play style of using the Tome of Fyendal to not only draw cards, but to also to gain hit points back, which also leads to, if you start your turn, which this did happen, he started his turn with the Fuse. So he had Dominate go again in the +2, broke the Mage Master Boots, played Tome of Fyendal from Arsenal, drew up to 5, healed 5, and then was able to have, I think, a bigger turn because not only did he heal, he also got to dominate me, and he got to draw, 2 cards. So he ended up having 2 bigger attacks than I think, because normally on the turns where you fuse and swing, you get to dominate and you get 1 decent attack and then 1 hammer maybe. But I think he ended up coming at me for like 14 or 16 that turn. So it was a very big turn for him, and he gained life that turn, which was very cool. He also was on Tome of Harvest, which I don't know if every Starvo player is running that. They might have it just for, I think it's an Earth card, but he actually used it to draw cards, and it was a little bit different of Starvo build, but ultimately it was very consistent. I wasn't able to get cards out of his hand because he either didn't have to block or he did block and then still found ways, to not use the crown. He had the crown when he needed it, but if he had Tome of Harvest, obviously he'd rather draw 3 cards than save 1 hit point. And I just liked that so much better. I obviously was very disappointed to lose. It wasn't a very close game. He kind of dominated me the whole way. He had card advantage. He had dominate. Not a whole lot I could do. But I enjoyed that game a lot more, I think, because of the way he built it. It was much more, even though he controlled the match all the way, it was just much more pleasant than, it wasn't just strictly I got crippling crushed and Oakenold. Those things did happen, but it happened in a more fun way, I think. I appreciated his build a lot more, and he was a very pleasant opponent, very nice to talk to. We talked for quite a bit afterwards about his build because I hadn't seen that particular build before, and I thought it was very cool. So ended up on the calling at 3-3 and dropping from there.
Well, nicely done. I mean, it's still a good showing. And you said he was running Earthlore Bounty, right, in that list? No?
I need to double check my notes.
Because that would make sense with all the card draw, but...
Well, there was... I need to double check. I think he was... Yes. Yeah, he was running Earthlore Bounty. Mm-hmm. Mage Master Boots, Tome of Fiendals, and Tome of Harvest. And that was one of the turns that ended up being the most devastating. But I enjoyed it so much, oddly enough, is he had the fuse. He attacked me with one of the Earth attacks. I don't remember. It wasn't red. I think maybe it was yellow. So it was for like normally 5 or 6, but then it went up to 7 or 8. And then what he had left in his hand is he played Tome of Harvest, The previous turn he had Tome of Harvest, so he had 3 Seismic Surge tokens. His first attack wasn't a Guardian attack. It was a fuse dominated Earth attack. So then after that attack, what he had left in his hand was a Oakenold that he got to play for free because it only cost 3. And then he got to Arsenal the Cranial Crush, which was such an efficient turn. Like, that was just outstanding to me. Like, yeah, it doesn't feel good to take 14 points of damage off of 4 cards, or 3 cards even, because he pitched 1 card for his Earth attack. He didn't have to pitch for Oakenold because it was free, and then still got the Arsenal card. Like, that's awesome to me. It was very cool to see. It felt more like, I think, probably how the hero was intended, to be more of a Guardian build instead of kind of a Casino build. And even though that was a lot of triggers that had to accumulate from 2 different rounds, I actually enjoyed that much more than just...
So he must have had a pulse to do that then, right? Because you're saying...
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So I want to say it was it had to have been the Lightning Earth Pulse. I can't remember which one that is, because the other card he had in hand was an Earth card, which is what he attacked with. So he had the Pulse, the Earth card, pitched the Earth card to play, pitched the pitched the Pulse card to play the Earth Attack, and then got to play Oak and Old for free. It wasn't fused, but it was still a 14 damage turn and an arsenal, which was just
So
outstanding.
he had Candle Hold in hand, and then he played a 2, and then played 3, and then arsenaled. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Either way, yeah, that's a hell of a turn. Well, and then I guess he could have played something from Arsenal too, I suppose. So
Yeah, like he could have used Oak and Old and just left it at that, but since he had the 3 Seismic Surge tokens that he had gotten from having Earth Lord Bounty and had playing the Tome of Harvest the round before, that was the better play. It was a dominated Earth Attack that cost 2, and then a free Oak and Old and an Arsenal. It was just outstanding.
yeah, awesome. All right, well, so then did you go grind side events, or were you fried? What'd you do?
I thought I'd be fried, but with the entry that I had purchased, I had side events each day, and it was basically, I think the way it worked out is there was basically one side event I could do each day for free.
Mm-hmm.
And so I ended up doing a constructed side event because I actually kind of thought like this might be my last time playing Viserai for a while. You know, I've stuck with him all year, learning him and wanted to be competitive with him. And I wasn't sure. I didn't realize, honestly, that the ProQuest season starts Saturday. Like we're already starting.
It already started, but yeah.
And I don't know if I'm prepared for that. Honestly, I feel like the only deck I know is Viserai. I would have liked a little bit more time to maybe try something new. But so I was like, even though I played 6 rounds of Constructed, which is probably the most I've done before, I was like, let's go for one more ride. And I did do a side event, and I ended up going 3-1. So I was very excited. The first round, the first round was a Starvo. I can't remember much about the match. I remember thinking I was going to lose, and then managed to have a kind of crazy set of string of cards that got me a lot of damage. The second round was against the Rhinar, and that was just a fun old school. I say old school. I imagine like with Rhinar versus aggro, it's just we're gonna hit each other in the face until one of us isn't around anymore. And my opponent was very pleasant. She was awesome. She had traveled, I think, from Wisconsin, I think. And we had talked, and it turns out that she had also went to Vegas because I had been to Vegas for the very first calling in Vegas. And it was a very cool story because she had said that she had just gotten into the game, had only been in there 2 weeks. The only card she had was a couple packs plus what she got from the pre-release event for Toa. So she had like half a Rhinar deck is what she said. And then the cards that she got from Toa, which obviously didn't necessarily help her for her Rhinar deck. And she ended up going into a sealed daily double, and they did a draft for Monarch, and she chose Levia and ended up going 4-0. So it was just very cool. Some of the people I met were super awesome. My round 3 opponent was a guy actually from New York. He was playing Prism. And I want to say that match was the most strategic, back and forth, crazy. It was very fun. But that game was, like I said, one of the sweatiest games I've ever played. The opponent was super nice. But it was all just about, when am I going to run out of bullets? I only have 9 Marvarian Skies in the deck. Yes, I run all of them, but those are a limited resource. And yes, I can pop your auras. So he's not necessarily focusing on putting a lot of auras out. He's focusing on doing damage and making me choose between trying to pop a Herald with my few cards that actually are 6s. And it was a very back and forth match. It was fun. I was a little disappointed I didn't see any Prisms in the calling because I felt like I had never felt confident against Prism at all until this Viserai build. I felt like I had a chance, and possibly a good chance, depending on if they focused too much on auras. I could pop them and stay in the game. He happened to be more of a, or maybe he sideboarded. I'm not sure. the more heralds to put that pressure on me. And it came down to, it was my last Mauvrian Sky in the deck. And it gave me the go again I needed to hit with the Rosetta, and he was out of, bullets for creating shields that particular turn, and I managed to grind out a win. And we checked my deck afterwards. I had no more Mauvrian Skies. I had no more 6 blocks. I knew I had run out of Runic Reclamation early on because I think I played one and used 2 to pop auras in like the first 3 turns. And I think my only other 6 attacks in there are
Arknight, right?
Arknight, and I think I had 2 of the Ninth Blade, which I only sideboard into now just for Prism. So I was out of all of those. So it was just a very fun match because it was so strategic, and we had a very good time with it. And
all right, so you were just finishing up on round 3. So then, what was your round 4 in the
round 3? I get that win, so I'm at 3-0, and I'm feeling really good because I went 3-3 in the calling. I'm 3-0 in a side event, and it gives out tickets. So I wanted some prize tickets. My round 4 opponent was Starvo. And he was a very nice gentleman from Hong Kong, actually. And I had met a lot of people from different countries. And I lost. But it was another game where I felt like there was some decision points that I could have made a different choice that may have helped give me an advantage in a match I think I'm not favored into. But overall, it was things you expect to see. There were times where I was doing quite a bit of damage and he was taking it because he had the fuse, and there were turns where he had the fuse, and I got hurt a lot and lost some cards. I don't remember anything particularly memorable other than he was a very pleasant opponent to play against, and even though I lost, ended up for the day, I think that took me to 6-4 after 10 rounds of constructed, and at that point I was very much fried. But it was very fun to have a 50-50 record in the calling, and then to follow up with a 3-1 performance in a side event. Made me feel pretty good about my deck. I had some misgivings about how it was performing before then, and it does have potato hands where you have either all attacks or all non-attacks, and you have to try to work your way around it. But I will say the MVP of this deck is still Tome of the Arknight. I only run one of them because I know it's not an amazing card, but for some reason I hit with that card so often, and it definitely has won me games. I think over the weekend, out of those 10 games, in the games I won, those 6 games, 5 out of the 6 of those, I had a successful Tome of the Arknight. I don't know if that directly translates to why I was able to win that game, but I just love that silly card so much, and it just seems to hit when you need it to sometimes. And so even though it's not the most amazing card in the world, to me it's the little MVP of the deck, and I love it.
Oh, nicely done. All right, and then Saturday night, what was the debauchery plan, or did you just go home and pass out?
There were a lot of people who were looking forward to going out. Some people went to a local pub. I think it was called the Dublin Bar. I was so exhausted, I just went to sleep. It was the complete opposite of when a lot of us went out to Vegas. A lot of them still went out to dinner and stuff, but I didn't feel like... I guess there was less temptation in Secaucus, New Jersey than there is in Vegas, because in Vegas every single night we were going out and staying out way too late because it's so easy to be like, oh, let's just drop and go hit up a casino or go catch a show or go to dinner. Mm-hmm. Whereas I felt like I was a little bit lamer in New Jersey, so I did miss out on some of the nightlife. I didn't go out as much. I didn't really explore New York, which I would have liked to have done. I was just mentally tired on Saturday night, so I think I even FaceTimed my wife and kids early so that I went to bed at like 8 o'clock, which never happens. But when you're away from home and your kids can't wake you up, I got some pretty good sleep.
Yeah, fair enough.
Good about it.
So then what was the plan Sunday?
So Sunday was the Battle Hardened, and I honestly forgot that Viserai was banned in Blitz. So I had happened to have in my deck box a Rhinar deck that I had used because I didn't feel like playing Viserai. I think when the skirmishes season had happened, I think late March, early April, whenever that was. So I had a Rhinar deck that it was just kind of for fun deck. So that's what I ended up rolling into the Battle Hardened with, and it didn't go well. I went. They had said early on that it was going to be X2, made the cut, and I started off O2. So the the first match was a very not fun match. I played against a Chane, and it was just one of those games where there was literally nothing I could have done would have changed the outcome of that match.
Mhm.
And it was kind of frustrating. I've been Starvoed before, and it didn't feel as bad as this particular match because his round one, because he got the start on the play, he made the roll. He started off with Soul Reaping, banished 2 cards, so he gains 2 resources, attacks me for 6. And then I forget what he did with the rest of his turn, but ultimately it was Soul Reaping and a Rosetta Thorn for 10 damage on round 1. And I was able to block some of that, obviously. My round 1, he blocked with 8 equipment because he has the Husk and he has the Grasp of the Arknight. So I effectively accomplished not much. And then his round 2 was a crazy string of events where he starts with an attack and then he creepers into a Tome of Fyendal to draw 2 more cards. Then he plays a Plunder Run from Arsenal that lets him draw a card and then get a bonus on attack. And then he has Art of War that he drew from his Tome of Fyendal and ends up, I don't remember the exact sequence of events, but it ended up being 5 attacks on round 2. And I was just dead. So that was just not fun. And I know a lot of that was an unfortunate series of card combinations that just happened to go off. But when you take, 35 damage in 2 turns,
Yeah,
it just feels bad.
that's kind of Blitz right now, though, right? So
Yeah, and to be fair, I guess it was just I wasn't expecting it. I thought with Chane I might have a turn or two to try to put some pressure on, but that was legitimately just nope. Not a whole lot you can do. And then I do remember my round 2 opponent because I spoke to him quite a bit because since I hadn't been playing a lot of Blitz except for the skirmish season, and not a lot of people locally play Guardian much, except for me and Jake. I was pleasantly surprised to see a Valda. And I hadn't seen Valda at the table before. So, I mean, I knew some of the tips and tricks being a
that's
a
what
Bravo player.
I've been playing. So,
And I was just pleasantly surprised. It was a good match. I ended up losing, obviously, going 0-2. But that deck seems so fun because it's doing some of what I saw that Starvo player do the day before with some of the Earth stuff. Obviously, she doesn't get Tome of Harvest, but she has Earth War Bounty, and she was generating seismic surges and discounting. And that discount becomes really significant when, if you have 2 seismic surge tokens, then your a Spinal Crush only costs a blue card, which is pretty easy to find in a Guardian deck, which was very cool. And then the one part that I forgot about her ability was that if she has 3 seismic surge tokens, then she gets dominate.
Mm-hmm.
And I just completely forgot that was a thing, and then ended up getting hit with a crippling crush, and I was like, wow, okay. I kind of forgot that was a thing you could do, but that's awesome.
Spinal?
Right. Not
Yeah.
a crippling crush, a spinal crush. Yeah. Sorry. That's Bravo Tech. But it was a very fun matchup. She just seems really cool, and I didn't really appreciate kind of how she plays because I hadn't been playing a lot of Blitz and kind of paying attention to how she works. She seems a lot of fun.
She is. Take it from me. All right, so I got to ask you about the fanboy stuff then from the weekend. So did you go to the Q&A thing on Thursday? Was it Thursday? I think it was Thursday.
If I understand that banquet was exclusively for people who
Oh,
were in the
that was the Q&A was at the banquet.
I believe so, yes.
Oh, okay, fair enough. Yeah, because the banquet was for the super special kids, right? The Pro Tour people.
Right. And if I remember correctly, from people who had gone, that I don't remember if the Q&A was before or after dinner, but a lot of them got to meet James White and talk to him and have a little bit of conversation with him. So that was very cool. That is the other thing I will say, that I was super jealous, because we roll in Friday morning, the start of ProQuest. I'm just there to hang out. Jake needs to register because he's going to be in the ProQuest. So we go up to the registration counter, and he gets this absolutely beautiful Heart of Fyendal playmat. And then he gets this really cool water bottle. And the water bottle has on the front Flesh and Blood. And then on the back it says, if I remember correctly, it's action, hydrate, or drink water, gain hydration, go again. Something like that. And it was super cool, because those were prizes that no one knew were going to be things that ProQuest players were going to get. And I was very disappointed to find out that it's only for ProQuest players. So I didn't get a cool mat or a cool water bottle, but I thought that was very cool of LSS, to have something that was a surprise, for even the people who had gone to the banquet the night before and hung out with James, to have something for them to get that was exclusively for them, that they didn't even know about until they show up at the registration table, which I thought was very, very cool.
Mm-hmm. Nice. And then I gave you an AR. That's an action required. That's a work term. But I gave you an AR when we went, and that was to track down a certain individual for me. So I'm going to do my best impression. All right, team. Okay, team. Come find me, Josh.
Well, I will say, he's not hard to find. I had seen him on Friday, and he was always kind of in conversation. I didn't want to interrupt, and it just so happened Saturday morning, right before the calling, he was walking out, I was walking in, and I got a chance to stop and say hi to him and let him know that you wanted to say hi vicariously. And super pleasant guy, super awesome. I did manage to complete that AR, and hopefully that picture is satisfactory.
It is. I'm not showing it right now, but I will be in editing. So, thanks, team. I appreciate it. No, that was really cool. I'm glad you got to meet him. One day we'll get to meet. So, awesome. All right. So overall, then, sounds like you had a great weekend.
Yeah, I had a lot of fun.
So is there anything you would do different? I mean, aside from, in-game choices, right? But is there anything overall you would do different, or you think could have gone better?
I think that I would have liked to have gone out with the guys a little bit more. And that's nothing to do with, the tournament itself, or the day. It's just in general. It was very cool to hang out with these guys. And I wasn't as sociable or outgoing as I was in Vegas. I did feel well rested, which I think, to me, it felt like it was important that I was well rested, because I was really trying to do well in the calling. And I think when I was at Vegas, I didn't have an expectation or even a desire really to be amazingly good at this calling, because it was going to be, I think for that calling, it was a draft, if I remember correctly, for Tales of Aria. Mm-hmm. But this time I was trying to be competitive, and I was trying to do well, so I thought my best chance was to kind of rest. So I kind of feel like I could have been a little less of a square and maybe loosened up a little bit. I also think that I am happy. I didn't do hardly any side events in Vegas. And I think it's easy to be like, I don't need side events. I can go to a casino or go eat at some awesome place or go see a show or something. And I'm really glad I did do more of the side events, not just because I got more competitive experience, but by and large, every opponent I played was extremely pleasant. We had great conversations. It was fun. You get prize tickets. It was just more to experience beyond just doing, yes, I played in a calling, and yes, I played in a battle hardened, and all of those things were had their own rewards, but the side events were very cool to have the opportunity to win some prize tickets and get something off the prize wall, or give some extra tickets to a buddy who really wants a particular play mat. It was just a lot of fun to actually participate more in what was going on in the center at that time, which was a lot of it's a lot of people playing Flesh and Blood, and it was super awesome.
So what did you end up walking away with swag wise?
What did I get?
I mean, so you did get the sleeves, right? As your
I did get the sleeves. I one of my personally favorite things that I received was a D6 from Simon Denning himself with Push the Point as the 6 on the D6. And I used that to track my rune chance for most of the weekend, except for when I needed 2 dice to track my rune chance. So that was very fun. I think ultimately I ended up giving most of my tickets to one of our local guys who's been on the channel before, Matt Di Gregorio, because he had a hankering for a mat. They had some very cool, if I recall correctly, they're full art mats, so they don't have the zones on them. But the one he ended up getting was the I can't remember the name of the card. It's Timekeepers.
Oh, the one with like the bent watch or whatever.
Right. From Everfest, that wizard card.
Got it.
And the art on that card is absolutely beautiful. And he got that mat, so I was happy to contribute most of my points to him for his quest in getting that mat. There is one thing you just reminded me of a regret that I had. Is they had an artist gallery or an artist talent table, and they had mats that you can get and artwork that you could get signed by the artists, the ones that were there. And unfortunately, there were some technical issues on day 1. I don't know if they ended up getting resolved by day 2, but I had an opportunity early on to go by the booth, but they didn't have a credit card reader at that location. So it was cash only, and I didn't have any cash. So I was like, okay, I'll just get some cash out later, and then I'll be able to go. And the whole rest of the weekend, that table was just absolutely slammed. And I could have made an effort, but Saturday was very busy for me because I was playing on the Calling, and then Sunday I was doing the Battle Hardened, and I maybe could have gone in after that to see if maybe I had cash at that point, or I could have used my card and actually get. They had I want to say it was the Mangle, not Mangle. Maybe it was either Artist for Mangle or Righteous Cleansing. I can't remember which. And I really wanted to get that signed because some of the Guardian art is absolutely beautiful. But I would have liked to have not only spent more time at that artist area, but actually able to contribute and get something to support those artists, because the art in Fab is absolutely outstanding. And to have some of that artwork would have been awesome. So next time I'm going to come prepared, and hopefully I don't recall them having that in Vegas. So hopefully if they have more events later where they have some of the artists there and you can get some of their proofs, or they had some that were as big as a poster and some of them were mats, I would love to get some of those because the art is just outstanding.
Yeah, that's cool. All right, awesome. Well, I just want to say the DC community's proud of you for doing what you did. You did well, repped us well. So awesome. Good job. I'm glad you had a good time. Are you headed to Vegas for the pre-release?
Unfortunately, no. I would like to have gone. It wasn't enough notice for me to try to finagle, especially since I think it ultimately will be a month after this, I think.
Yeah.
So they only had about 6 weeks
notice. It was a little less than 7 weeks notice. So yeah.
Yeah. So I would love to go. There are some locals who are going to be able to make it. I'm a little jealous, but I kind of had to emotionally prepare myself for the fact that I wasn't going to be able to go to Vegas this year. Mainly because I didn't know it was going to be a thing. I'm glad I went to the first ProQuest. I had kind of felt like if I had known, would I have done the ProQuest or Vegas? And part of me thinks I probably would have liked to have gone to Vegas again, but I'm actually really glad I went to the first ProQuest. There were so many people there. It was very cool to see. Like, I was shocked. Like, I got in late. Like I said, that Thursday night, I think I finally got to my hotel at 11 o'clock at night. and there's 50 people in the hotel lobby lounge because it had a like after you get through reception, there was quite a few tables set up around kind of the elevator section and where they do like their intercontinental breakfasts and stuff. At least 50 people playing Fab and testing and grinding, and it was good to see that. As you know, I know locally our events, happen and they fire each week, and we get to play the game. But it's good to know that you go somewhere where yes, you expect there to be a lot of people who are enjoying the same game that you do, but to actually see a lot of people there and they're all gaming and grinding and laughing and having a good time. And then you get to the convention hall and there's 2,500 people doing events and side events, and it was just very cool. It was a cool experience. It was even bigger than Vegas, which I thought there's no way. Vegas was surprisingly big for what we thought. I think we were happy. I think a lot of us were happy that it was over or around 1,000, if I recall right.
I thought it was like 900. Right? Does that
yeah, and I
sound
think
about right?
some people are like, "Oh, we're hoping it's over 500 and maybe 600 or 700." But we got kind of close to 1,000. That's awesome. And the numbers I'm hearing from this, and I don't really remember how the other call-ins went because I didn't get to go to them, so I don't know what their numbers were. But I've heard a lot of different sources say overall 2,500 different people, unique gem profiles were involved in some way, shape, or form, and at the events going on in New Jersey, and it was just very cool to be a part of.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, okay, last question for you, then I'll let you go because I know we're pushing an hour here. So the calling did sell out. Mm-hmm. So it capped at 1,000, right? So what does that mean? What does that mean for Fab, right?
I think that's a good problem to have. I do feel bad. There was one local.
It's not a bad problem. Let's be very clear about that.
One of the locals had kind of, I guess from previous experience, I think he went to 2 of the callings last year. He bought some side event packages. Wasn't sure if he was going to do the calling. I thought, okay, I'll go ahead and do the calling, only to find out that full. Mm-hmm. And one thing I think that was extremely smart of LSS, I don't know if this is standard operating procedure because I've never really been involved in a competitive scene at all, is that they anticipated that there was going to be players who were actually in the ProQuest who were going to drop out because they took their 3 losses and would want to play in the calling, and they had reserved spots for them. Mm-hmm. And I thought that was very cool. I don't know if that, like I said, I don't know if that's standard operating procedures for events that are run that way, but
yeah, that's a classy move.
Friend,
that's classy.
Yeah, like even though my friend didn't get to make it and he missed out, I thought it was very cool that they anticipated that would be a thing that might happen and specifically set aside slots for those people to do exactly that. So that was very cool. And I like that there were so many people involved. Like 8 rounds was very daunting to hear when they tell you in the players meeting beforehand that there's going to be 8 rounds. Ooh, that's kind of intimidating for me as someone who I don't have a lot of competitive experience, and I definitely never played 8 rounds of Fab in a row, so it's kind of intimidating to think, even if I do win, I don't know if I have the juice to go 8 rounds. And then to have to come back the next day is crazy. So respect to everyone who was able to have success and make day 2 and make it even through day 1 of both the ProQuest and the calling is just very cool experience.
Yeah.
But yeah, 1,000 players, that's outstanding.
Yep. Well, we can keep it short, but fear of missing out has worked very well for Fab to date. So the fact that people wanted to and were not able to will probably bode well for events, at least in the near future. So that's a pretty cool thing, I think.
Yeah, very
cool. All right, man. Well, I know we're pushing the hour, so I wanted to thank you for spending your evening here talking to us. Were there any other shout-outs you wanted to give? Any pats on the back for the weekend?
Yeah, just real quick, I want to say I'm extremely happy I was finally able to meet Simon and James in person. We didn't manage to get a photo for the team, so I did fail that AR, unfortunately. But we did get to meet a couple of times. Extremely pleasant. Simon made day 2 in the ProQuest, had a very good run. I'm not sure how James did in the calling, but we did get to talk a little bit before that, and we talked a little bit Sunday, and he's just a super nice guy. Jake did make day 2 for the calling, and ended up, I think, failing out like the round before the last round. He ended up taking his last loss that made it to where he couldn't make the cut. So he had a pretty good reign. So shout out to Jake Burns for having technically making day 2 for ProQuest, setting that aside to make a run in the calling. He went day 1 6-2, and I think he ended up 8-4. I think was the final, or 9-4, something like that. But he had a good run.
Nicely done, Jake. I mean, no surprise there. We know Jake's a good player, so.
I'll just be happy when he has to play something other than Guardian. He's got to play something new.
Well, not for the next month, which has been quite the discussion, hasn't it? So, but we all knew that was coming, right? So we all knew, not a surprise to anybody. So, all right, man. Well, I'm gonna wrap this up and let it go. Well, thank you very much for tuning in. I just want to remind everybody about the giveaways that we have going on right now. Currently, we have the Heralds of Awesome 2 giveaway. For those Heralds of a Rebirth, just leave us a comment on a Go Again video like this one, and be a subscriber. And then we also have, if you are headed to Vegas, we do have the Fabled ticket package giveaway, eligible to anyone who comments basically this week on, not basically, definitely this week by the 22nd for our gameplay videos. So Fabled event package, I'm super jealous about that one, because not only can I not go to Vegas because it's my son's birthday, but that's a pretty sweet gig. So anyway, anything else to say before we get out of here, Joshua?
Go Commando.
Go Commando.